There's something beautiful about AI healing us. And then we totally spiraled into this like doomsday. No, actually AI is going to replace us. And we're like at the brink of a mass extinction event.
I see this as the new paradigm. This is us helping create not only do science, but make science get to people.
Biology is not simple. It is alien technology that we barely understand. And when you scale it up, even a cell within itself is more complex than any supercomputer still on this planet could model.
We recognize that drug development is just too slow and too expensive. Metanova was born to be a crypto-native biotech company. We're really interested in drugs that basically are able to regulate key foundational behaviors that we think have outsized effects for health, well-being, and even longevity.
I think it is going to be the way. We need new paradigms to really be able to advance as a society.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Bethencourt, and I'm delighted to welcome you again to another episode of DeSci Pilled. Today, we have the fantastic founding team of Metanova, which is the first subnet on Bittensor focused on drug discovery. I'm sure many of you are going to say, well, what is that? We're going to dive deep in it. Just as a quick reminder, this is never financial or medical advice. We cover all the topics here at DeSci Pilled, and I'm delighted to have Micaela and Pedro here. So, Micaela, I know a lot of people are going to be like, at first they're going to be like, what is it even is Bittensor? Could you tell us what Bittensor is and why it's really, really interesting for the future of drug discovery?
Yes. Hi, and thank you so much for having us here. So Bittensor is inspired by Bitcoin in many ways and solves many problems at once. It's a crypto network that focuses on different kinds of AI marketplaces and development. And the idea being that, similar to Bitcoin, instead of just wasting that compute in solving random mathematical problems, why don't we use that to actually train AI, right? And so in our particular case, we're focused on drug discovery and running decentralized virtual screenings, but there's 128 different subnets within Bittensor solving all different kinds of AI problems, whether it's building companies that are, renting GPUs or running financial predictions. We're all trying to make use of that compute that's being used to emit the coin and direct it towards actually solving different kinds of AI problems.
Amazing. I mean, I came across Bittensor. I was just intrigued by it, right? It was just, someone said, oh, it's the Bitcoin for AI. And I was like, that makes a ton of sense. Rather than useless hash, proof of work, which is literally just algorithmic hash, you could actually use that for compute. Makes total sense. And I was like, I wonder if there were any science teams. And then I think I was listening to a podcast from James Altucher, and he basically said, well, there's this, drug discovery subnet on Bittensor that's using compute for drug discovery. And I was like, oh, wow. And then I think I dove deeper, and then I started seeing really cool stuff like HDAC inhibitors, which we all know from longevity, very important. And it just blew my mind. And so, I came across you and Pedro, of course. And so could you tell me just a little bit about both of your journeys, how you met, and then what was the inspiration to start Metanova? And then we'd kind of dive deeper, because I know you have a big announcement coming this week. We won't be airing this week, so you can actually share it. And I'm looking forward to hearing that as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm originally from Peru. So I'm always very interested in actually decentralization. My background's pretty varied. Most recently, prior to Metanova, I was working as a strategy partner for Google and was translating climate and ecology science into urban design and development. So I've always been very interested in frontier domains and kind of bringing these different pieces together for true innovation. But I have a deep passion for drug development and became really obsessed with researching about neuroplasticity and really thinking about kind of a new class of therapeutics that can reprogram body and mind, recognizing that there are obviously limits to what I can contribute as a non-domain expert. I went on a hunt for the right technical co-founder and was lucky enough to be connected to Pedro, actually by people that were part of the DeSci movement. So we came together and were interested in, both decentralizing science and creating like a new kind of template for a crypto native biotech company. I first bought Bitcoin in 2011, and I think of it as more than just a financial solution. And we're really excited to be now working on the Bittensor network to really solve so many of these issues simultaneously.
So, Micaela, you're an OG, right? Like having bought, I tried to buy back then, and I couldn't figure out how to buy. And full disclosure, I was trying to buy mushrooms. I was in the UK trying to buy mushrooms on Silk Road, and I couldn't quite figure it out. So, I think I was in like a university. Well, I probably shouldn't even. I was thinking I was at a university like lab or something, computer lab, trying to figure out how to buy it. So, anyways,
yeah,
like, so Pedro, like, what inspired you? You're in Brazil, like, what inspired you to kind of do this and kind of join forces with Micaela on Metanova?
Yeah, so my background is pretty much in drug design from ever. I am like very passionate about the field from like a very young age. How we can modulate biological systems with specific molecules just always like got all of my attention. So I focus all my academic studies in drug design, specifically in the part of bioinformatics, chemoinformatics, and platforms for drug development. And after that, I also had relevant entrepreneurial experience in building platforms, specifically to employ virtual screening to find small molecules. Now, integrating all of that with the decentralized part, this is the first time.
Awesome. And one thing that I'm inspired by is both of your stories, right? I mean, it's basically a US, Peru, and Brazil story, which I think is the purpose of Bittensor. Bittensor's mission, and I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole with Bittensor. I find it absolutely fascinating. I got in way too late, as per always. But I find it really fascinating, this idea of empowering global teams and global talent to harness AI, right? Like it's something that, most of AI is kind of happening, around a small little area around San Francisco. And yet it doesn't have to, Silicon Valley is now in the cloud and AI seems to have re-centralized in San Francisco, but it really does not have to. All you need is access to compute and really interesting minds that can come up with new ways of doing things, right? And I don't know if either of you have a perspective on that.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think this is why it's like a personal mission on a lot of fronts. And I think for me, like I ended up going to Berkeley, so I ended up making it to the Bay Area, but I am originally from Peru. And so I understand that there is just so much talent around the world that doesn't get to necessarily go down that path and therefore isn't really tapped. And so, crypto, I think, provides this really amazing opportunity to really rethink capital allocation, to really think about hiring from like a global perspective and really do it based on merit and not just on like prestige or, different kinds of brands that have emerged across time.
And one thing that I think a lot of people may not be aware of, especially because I think the Bittensor network is kind of this new emergent network that even though it's been around since I think it was like around 2021, I'm still kicking myself. I was reeling from the FTX thing. I was going, when are we going to zero? I was not looking for new networks. I wish I had been. I think it was something like 50 cents or something back then per token. And there's only 21 million Tau. So Bittensor. So, that I found that absolutely fascinating. Similar economics to Bitcoin, and recently we've seen Zcash has similar 21 million token cap. So it's really caught the zeitgeist, I think, of a lot of people, this kind of way of preserving value and making sure it's not inflationary. And so, one of the things that's been fascinating has been the actual benchmarks from a lot of the Bittensor services and subnets actually outperform many of today's very established foundational models, which I find really interesting, right? Lower cost, faster, and often better. That's kind of what you want. You want this Darwinistic ecosystem that rewards efficiency, right? And that's something, I mean, have you talked to other subnet owners or team members? Like what are their thoughts on how the Darwinian ecosystem forces all categories that use AI to evolve, obviously not just drug development.
Yeah, Darwinian is the right term. And in fact, actually, my background in ecology sometimes seems handy when we think about systems design within Bittensor specifically. So yes, the token itself is inspired by Bitcoin, 21 million total, having schedules as well. And then subnets themselves also have tokens on the same design.
And that's 21 million, which is also really cool. It's 21 million
Yes.
tokens per
21 million,
subnet, which
Yes.
means you have the same scarcity and economics as Bitcoin for the subnets too.
Yes, yes. And I think it makes it the right environment to build like for long-term growth and stability. Like if you're really in it for creating value, it gives you the right schedule to scale up as a startup, because it's essentially it's a solution for like crowdsourcing funds. It's a solution for accessing like cost neutral compute. And it's a solution for hiring talent that's like ever increasing and competing against one another. So when we talk to other subnets, I mean, we're all really excited about the opportunity and actually have gotten to meet a lot of the teams around the world. It definitely stress tests you because it is an adversarial environment. Like you are developing AI in the open, which means that you have an interesting relationship with your workforce or your miners, who are heavily incentivized to exploit your scoring functions and figure out what is the shortest path to that token reward, regardless of what your particular, AI problem or what kind of value you're actually trying to create in the world. I think that stress testing builds more resilient technology. I think there's a competitive edge in having that part be decentralized and adversarial in nature. Like we found for us in particular, and we haven't even gotten to what we really do, but broadly speaking, virtual drug screening, we know that the reliability of the predictions of these models is, not as high as we would want it to be, or it's not as impressive to people that aren't part of the field. What we found in organizing these challenges and having this adversarial relationship with our miners is that they would immediately point to the blind spots in the model, the areas that were not reliable, and would therefore allow them to exploit our scoring function. What that means is we can then grab that data and retrain better, more reliable models. So we think that this actually has an edge in the way that we're going to be retraining our models and the kind of technology that we can develop as a result.
Fascinating. I mean, just so interesting technically, right? Like I know that, and I think, you and I are both biologists, and Pedro, are you a biologist as well?
So my background, I have a STEM science and technology bachelor degree, followed by biosystems PhD. So not exactly a biologist, but
biosystems, very similar, right? I think, the appeal of the Darwinistic aspect of these ecosystems, like as technology gets more complex, it starts to resemble biology more and more. A lot of people are like, oh, but biology is not simple. It is alien technology that we barely understand. And when you scale it up, even a cell within itself is more complex than any supercomputer still on this planet could model, right? And so as we're starting to get these very complex models, these very complex AIs, and we're moving into the world of biology deeper and deeper and understanding the context, like the Darwinian aspect of this is like fascinating because, who knows, maybe there's a Chinese or Russian mathematician that, or a Nigerian mathematician that figures something out that no one else has, and you can apply to your models and dramatically improve drug development. Like it's really interesting.
It is indeed really interesting, and it's also very exciting to see all of those emergent behaviors that you can see when you have the right incentives for these kinds of systems. Because, for example, you're not usually going to see for newly published models that are really good and well published, exactly where are the problems of the model? Where is it failing? The right incentives for it to be really portrayed to everyone are not present when we're talking about the scientific, publishing currently. So the fact, for example, that the first model that we were working, right, the miners so quickly they were finding the biases of the model. Oh, under this specific range for those properties, we can game the model. Like, this wasn't integrated when this model was published, and we could find it.
Right. Nobody has the incentive to publish bad data, right, and results. So everybody's trying to either protect their company's valuation, or they're just trying to get, prestige by being, the co-author of like some important paper. Our miners do not care. They, in fact,
they just want the rewards, right?
Wrong.
They want the rewards, and they want someone else to not game it.
They also want to prove us wrong, and it turns out that from like an ecological perspective, like you're probably best off having some sort of combination of collaboration and competition.
Specialization, this is a new way to do science.
Adaptation, it is.
Right? This is a new way to do science, really. Like, it is competition, collaboration. It's a new way of doing science. It's kind of adversarial science, which is really interesting too, right? Like, it unlocks something new.
It does indeed. High-level stress testing for everything and heavily incentivized.
I would love to see a ton of these models adversarially tested, because we're seeing all of these like incredible like science models and like DeepMind and everything else, and I'm sure some of these models unravel under these adversarial tests.
Yeah, they do. They do, in fact, actually rather quickly. I'll also just take a step back and say, so basically we're focused on drug discovery, and we're running two different kinds of like challenge formats. One of them, we're basically asking our miners to submit sets of molecules that have high binding affinity to a target of our interest and a low binding affinity to a series of anti-targets. Why? Because we're interested in compiling libraries of molecules that are, potent and selective. We have an oracle model that we select. In this case, right now, it's Boltz-2, which was published by MIT and Recursion Pharma. And we use that as the oracle, right? Because we're decentralized. As subnet owners, we get to define the challenges. The miners are competing to submit the best submissions. And then there's validators that need to reach consensus and score the submissions in order to assign a winner. This means we need to be able to create problems that are permissionless and verifiable. In addition to that, we recently launched a new type of competition format that's running in parallel to that. And in that case, miners are submitting basically different kinds of search algorithms. They're submitting code. What that allows us to do is to really innovate the way that we look for anything within vast chemical universes, right? We're providing our miners right now with like 65 billion molecules. And the task at hand is how good can you get to shortlisting? The reason being that we're optimizing right now step 1 of virtual screening, but we know that with drug development, each step gets exponentially more expensive. And so if we can de-risk this step 1 and be a lot more certain, a lot more confident that we are picking the right molecules and searching these chemical spaces effectively, we won't be making these ginormous investments in drugs that ultimately will fail in later stages.
Fascinating. Yeah, really super interesting. So kind of to go higher level again, and I'm sure we'll dive back because I have a bunch of questions. So tell us about Metanova. Tell us your mission, and I know that there's an exciting announcement. So kind of walk us through all of that.
Yeah. So Metanova was born to be a crypto native biotech company, as we have mentioned, really trying to push decentralization, both on the virtual screening step, but then also in R&D. I think we recognize that drug development is just too slow and too expensive. And as much as we think that we also should be making changes in the regulatory environments of the US and other countries, I think there's an immediate opportunity right now to do a little bit of geographic arbitrage when it comes to the R&D process and how you piece these different steps together. We're really interested in meta-programming drugs, or drugs that basically are able to regulate key foundational behaviors that we think have outsized effects for health, well-being, and even longevity. So whether that's sleep, rest, focus, social connection, we think from an ideation perspective, being able to reprogram body and mind is kind of upstream from disease treatment, disease prevention. So
that makes a ton of sense. I mean, whether most of us as we get older, it's harder to get good sleep. uh, gaining weight. Like there's all these very simple foundational things that if you get better sleep, you stay at better weight, everything else downstream of the, actual disease, you actually reduce the risk of getting those types of diseases, right?
Yes, and it's very much inspired by GLP-1s and how successful they have been across different indications. So that was like, that was originally developed to treat type 2 diabetes. But what we are seeing is that in, tackling metabolic health has positive benefits that are like way outside of what you would imagine, like neuroprotective effects, anti-inflammatory effects. So that's kind of the core of our thesis, is like, let's go upstream from one system and find something that will have an impact. A lot of the times people are thinking about developing a drug for X disease because ultimately that's how it will get approved. We can get there. Like if you think not just about type 2 diabetes or, different kinds of problems that are associated to basically your eating patterns, you're going to probably come up with a solution that can help you deal with cardiovascular disease alongside it, and apparently maybe even, chronic inflammation and other conditions that we think are really important in living like healthy lives and like improving human experience today, right?
Yep, amazing. And so I actually don't know what your announcement is. And I know you're going to be announcing it today or tomorrow. And we'll come out. Today is December 3rd. It'll come, this episode will come out in a couple weeks. So I am intrigued. So what is it? What new exciting thing is happening?
So we're partnering with a Chinese-based biotech company to expand beyond small molecules and to actually add nanobodies to Nova.
Oh,
so
interesting.
We will be stepping into the world of biologics and also now have a guarantee that we will be running tests in vitro for 50 of the candidates that are identified by our miners, which is good because right now we have, compiled a library of about like 11 million molecules, but we're really interested to get to step 2, which is the real world validation step. So we will be partnering with this Chinese biotech company to go all the way through the wet lab data.
Amazing. And so for those people that don't understand like what a nanobody is, because I know there's been some really interesting breakthroughs on AI modeling for antibodies specifically. Could you tell us what nanobodies are and why they're interesting?
Yeah, so nanobodies are basically this a specific kind of antibody that was found in camelids, so llamas and the cousins of llamas.
Yeah, and just for everyone to hear, camels, camelids, camels. Camels have very interesting antibodies. I know for a lot of people, they're like camels, and I'm like, yeah, no, camels are actually, they have really interesting antibodies.
Really, really interesting because they are small. You can do some specific steps. So they are like humanized, so they are better received by the human body. And the very nice thing about them is that you can really improve potency and you can get like really, really, really potent and selective antibodies for so many kinds of indications, right? So a few of them have advanced like pretty far in terms of development, right? If we compare with the classical antibodies, you still have many more classical antibodies approved, but nanobodies hold a lot of promise. And so, yeah, we're super excited with the potential here because currently, as Micaela said, we have 2 incentive mechanisms running. So miners can run by submitting code that is used to look for molecules, and then the faster code and more efficient code wins, or they can submit molecules directly. With this new structure, they will also be able to submit nanobody sequences.
That's I think that is going to be transformational because I think the precision. So in the area, and I've also just newly announced new company, Raptor. It's a longevity company that I've co-founded with my team. And one of the interesting things is just the sheer number of new insights around aging that we're getting today, right? So everything from, senescent cell markers to inflammaging issues, like precision targeting could be really transformative if you can speed it up. And I think we're now starting to see a new era of biotech companies that really embrace DeSci, decentralized science. It's less about just crypto as a token and much more about speed and costs, right? I think that's what I think people don't yet realize, but will soon. That actually, no, these are real biotech companies that are just faster, cheaper, better. I don't know if either of you have
No,
thoughts on that.
absolutely. And I mean, I think that's why we wanted to build a platform that was completely flexible and target agnostic. Because if you have a drug target of interest, like we can help you. Like it's not just about powering our own R&D. It's about becoming basically like the gateway for anybody's exploration into drug discovery, drug development. And I think part of the equation of making that faster is knowing when to partner with people in China, people in Brazil, people from like around the world, because there are ways to optimize these different steps that ultimately can still lead to FDA approval under like a specific disease. But like, let's think about this problem globally, and like, let's think about what are actually the foundations of health and well-being, not just one disease.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you talk to like veteran biotech OGs, some of them are complaining, oh, biotech's leaving the US. And I think that is a very siloed way of viewing things. It's like the US hasn't made itself competitive. Biotech should leave the US and go where it's cheaper and faster to get these drugs developed, right?
Biotech should be global.
Should be global.
And we actually think Brazil also has like a very special place in the R&D pipeline. And we're excited just to work with everybody from like around the world. It's like anybody from around the world can buy our token, can be like, can share in our success, can like support the work that we are doing. Anybody from around the world can compete to submit a molecule, soon a nanobody, or a search algorithm. And I think, we need to be thinking at that scale, because otherwise we're looking at an industry that has really like plateaued in its progress and has become like inefficient. We think this requires solving issues like at a business model level, at a structural level. Like it's not really a scientific limitation. It's how do you fund these companies? It's where do you get the tests done, right? So we can't really be limited by geography anymore. It made sense back in the day. And, I think it led to like immense amounts of medical innovation, but I think we're coming to a point where we need to innovate how we do this all together again.
Yeah, agreed. I'm a big fan of, there's this book called The Fourth Turning. I don't know if either of you have heard of it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so check it out. It's a fourth turning. It basically talks every four generations, all of the institutions that used to serve those generations no longer fit for purpose. So the argument is that really our world today, the modern world, was really built in a post-World War II perspective, right? It was built for the industrial era. It was built for an era that was, really about manufacturing, industrial. You see it almost everywhere, right? Like our money is broken. Our institutions are broken. Science funding is broken. And so there's just so many things that are broken. And through this fourth turning, a process of either destroying old institutions and rebuilding new ones, or adapting existing institutions to be more fit for purpose. And I view this kind of DeSci, decentralized science, virtual AI, biotech, all part of that movement of, hey, how we used to do science no longer works. It's obvious to anyone that's involved in science. Like, the FDA, a lot of people don't realize this, but the FDA, there are divisions within the FDA that don't approve one drug per year. Like, it's an insane statistic. And this isn't just once that it happens. This happens every year. There are multiple divisions within the FDA that don't even approve one drug. And it's shocking that happens. And so it's an anti-innovation engine in many ways, these blockers of innovation. And they've sprouted out. And what the FDA do, the world tends to follow. But now we're starting to see that pattern break. So we're seeing China willing to be more aggressive and move things forward. We're seeing other countries also saying, hey, these rules and these restrictions don't make sense anymore.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I will give them grace in the fact that like it's actually really hard to develop something that's safe and effective. And like they do have, an important responsibility of making sure that anything that hits the market is safe and effective for diverse groups of people, which is no small task. But the reality is like we need to be trying every single different strategy we can simultaneously. And I think DeSci is going to be a core piece in trying this. And I really like I need to check out this book after this podcast.
It's big with crypto people, by the way, Micaela. Like crypto people, science people are not like, have never heard of this book. And then crypto people are all like, it's almost a religious experience, talking about it. I'm like, oh, it's interesting. It's just a framework for thinking.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's also built into our R&D thesis, right? Because I think also the human body and mind hasn't gotten a chance to really catch up to the immense amounts of change that's coming with like all of this technological development. Like we live in fundamentally different worlds and are not that different from Neanderthals. So it makes sense that we actually could benefit from like chemical aids to adapt to this new reality. Like we are seeing loneliness as an epidemic, and yes, there are different kinds of therapeutic modalities, but I think there's like also something to be said about coming up with drugs that can offer like a glimpse of a new kind of reality. Like when you're stuck in like negative patterns or just have never had a firsthand experience of what it is like to live a regulated life where you sleep, eat well, live healthily, it's hard to really imagine how to get there. So it's not to say like we're trying to like just drug people for the sake of it. It's like we're trying to like really help humans like adapt to like the new challenges that we have in our society today.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the Culture series. Are either of you familiar with the Culture series by Ian M. Banks? It's a sci-fi book, a series of sci-fi books. Elon Musk recommends it every time you like, how do I see the future? It's like read the Foundation series and I, Robot, and then also read the Culture series by Ian M. Banks. And there, within the Culture series, they actually have the Culture. It's a hybrid human and minds, AI minds culture. It's like a very positive spin on the future of the universe and the galaxy with humans and humanoids and AI minds that work together, respect each other. The humans within the culture actually have specific glands that manufacture all sorts of interesting chemicals and molecules that help them regulate themselves, sleep, heal, do all sorts of things. And it's just like, when you were talking about it, it made me think about that, where it's just like, we're not at the end of evolution. We are at the beginning of infinity, right?
Oh, beautiful.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. No, I love that. And I think there's something beautiful about AI healing us. As I think when I was younger, I was always really interested in like utopian political thought and like sci-fi novels. So definitely draw inspiration from that. And when we started dreaming of these new technologies, we were so excited. Like it was like the promise of this golden era. And then we totally spiraled into this like doomsday. No, actually AI is going to replace us. And we're like at the brink of a mass extinction event. And so I think we have an opportunity here to actually use AI to heal and to live better.
I love that. Pedro, as someone that works with the machines, what are your thoughts?
I get very excited, and in a way, I feel like talking with all those pointed references. I see this as the new paradigm, as like helping build a new paradigm in a very classical philosophy of science way, a very Thomas Kuhn way. Like this is us helping create a new paradigm on how to not only do science, but make science get to people by having the right incentives in terms of how capital is distributed to in the many steps that you have to, for example, get to a drug that is approved. Yeah, and having the competition where it matters the most.
And I love how you mentioned the philosophy of science, because, that's something that, as a scientist, when I first started, I was very anti-humanities. And I feel shameful for saying that, right? Like, I remember thinking it was just fluff. It was like, why do I need to read philosophers and philosophy? And it's just fluff. It's just fluff. And then you realize, actually, if you really want to get great at understanding science and moving the frontier forward, actually, you need new frameworks for thinking. Science doesn't help you with that. Like in fact, you will end up in a dead end unless you think about new frameworks of how to think. And I think that this draws us into a really interesting place, right? With AI and new frameworks for thinking about science.
Exactly. I think it is going to be the way, because for all those reasons, all those points that are not like really working smoothly in society today, we need new paradigms to really be able to advance as a society.
And we're so early. Like I mean, we all use AI, right, to do science and do research. The fact that today's frontier models are as good as pretty good PhDs in pretty much every area today just blows my mind to think, well, it's probably going to be 10x better in a year, right? So what does that mean? I don't even have a framework, talking about frameworks for thinking. How do we think about that? Like, how do we think about how to move science forward when, we're talking about, I don't even know what this is, something that is 10x better than your average PhD in all the sciences. What is that? Have either of you kind of thought about that and where we're going?
I think more and more it will be super important and super clear to everyone how relevant decentralized systems are going to be in terms of not only aligning all of those systems to focus them in the right problems for humanity, but also in terms of orchestrating how the capital moves. So it is happening efficiently, right? I think this will be like a core for this new paradigm because this is happening already. So then it becomes a matter of, okay, how are we going to orchestrate all of this power? How are we going to channel that to really get to this new amazing world that we all want, right?
And I think it will be necessary because part of what we saw is like, you can't get there. Or we think it's highly inefficient to get there in like private closed lab systems. Because in order to like really find signal in the chemical universe, you need really large, diverse data sets. And small AI startups do not have the incentive to share that data with each other because they're trying to like protect their valuations, right? So another reason to have these things being, done on chain so that they're open, they're reproducible. There's like token incentives for actually sharing things early on rather than like protecting all of your secrets and not really sharing any of the flaws in your systems that are ultimately compromising the probability of the success of your projects. So I think science in particular is ripe for disruption and for that like 10x improvement in AI. Because up until now, we've been seeing that AI has not been able to deliver its promise in like really helping drug discovery. We're seeing the beginnings of it, but it's like it takes hundreds of millions of dollars of funding. We're talking about a completely different model, and I think in order to be really effective across so many different needs, right? Whether that's like diseases or like for example, rare diseases, I think is a great example of that, where there isn't enough economic incentive to really develop a drug for like a population of like 1,000 or like a very limited group. What we are creating today, and one of the things that we have observed in doing this, again, in an adversarial verifiable environment where we constantly need to like inject randomization so that nobody can really predict what the problem is going to be, is that we are getting to a point where we think we're going to have a competitive edge in creating generalizable models, generalizable search algorithms, things that can help not just push new drugs for cancer, but also maybe really small, like rare diseases that otherwise wouldn't get any attention from like traditional biotech companies.
And we're desperately in need of that. I'm an advisor to Curetopia, which is on it's the Cures token on Solana. And, there are just so many rare diseases. It's actually overwhelming, right? Like literally everyone wants help. Everyone needs help. So how do you help them? One thing I'd love to get both of your perspectives on, I've been trying to think through like, where are we going? Where are we going? Because sometimes thinking through where we're going will help you get to interesting places. And so I was like, well, one day, I don't know when that one day is, maybe in a year, maybe 2 years, definitely within 5 years, right? Definitely within 10 years, you're going to be able to vibe code cures, right? And like the idea of that you literally just go into your favorite model or, maybe you go to your like Metanova, front end and you go, hey, I just got diagnosed with this. I don't know whether it's cancer or rare disease. Can you cure this for me? And it just the agents, now you've got an army of agents that go out and figure things out and come back to you with the cleanest, simplest, fastest, least expensive path to make your nanobody or whatever you need to make, and then you're going to have a preclinically tested product on the other side, right? What are your thoughts on that? Like, is that viable? Is that like where, when you think it through, what do either of you or both of you think?
So I think this is absolutely amazing to imagine. I think, especially when we're talking about biology and chemistry, there is the need for a better way to also integrate data in the right way, so we can get to the right level of confidence to get there. But absolutely, I think we're moving in this direction, right? Of course, we're talking about a process that is like today pretty complex with pretty hard steps and a very high failure rate. But one must imagine how the world would be under those circumstances and what we would need to do to get there. And I think in a lot of fronts, things are starting to align. I think the next frontier will also be in terms of data, how to integrate data in the right way so the models can make the best possible predictions for us to get to this level.
Yeah, and I think Bittensor is really good for the human in the loop segue fields, which is, I think, what we're talking about. Like, we're seeing like a lot of really exciting developments with like new LLMs and like the science, the AI's co-scientists. And I think we are pushing like the frontier of like machine learning and really thinking about where does it still make sense to innovate with humans in the loop, with understanding how to do data curation, with like really pushing the AI so that we can get to the place where we're like just vibe coding. And there will be probably like a symbiotic relationship between these pieces, and we will hopefully like meet on the horizon line.
Micaela, I hadn't thought about that, especially with the the Bittensor network, because the subnets doesn't really matter whether it's human or machine. And so you could imagine if you're putting together these boxes, right? And each box, you need some work to be done. The agent on top can manage that. But if you look at it just from the Bittensor perspective, all the pieces in theory should be there, right? Your agents, your CPU power, like your text to image, your data analysis, your memory, your like all these pieces in theory should be there. And so then the question is like, okay, well, you need data curation. Is it going to be a combination of a human in the loop? I love that saying, by the way, human in the loop, AI processes. And so you could eventually, if you're trying to get to, vibe coding a cure, there can be several humans in the loop through that, as long as you can actually put some metrics around. What's the cost? What's the time? Typically, how long does it take? And then you can actually start to build it out even before it's fully AI-ified.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay, so as we're going through all of this, so there are a lot of people that are watching that are crypto people, that are science people, that are biotech founders, or investors, just a whole range of different people, PhD people doing their PhDs, just people that are interested in general. How can people get involved with Metanova? Like, what can they do to kind of get involved?
You can join us in many ways. I think you can support the project by buying Nova, the token. You can contribute to the actual like research and development that's going on by mining our network, that being submitting molecules to nanobodies or search algorithms. And we're always like open for like collaborations. Like, we're really excited about really partnering with anybody and everybody to push the frontier of drug discovery. So if you are interested in virtual screening services, if you're interested in expanding our validation throughput, we're really here to push that frontier together.
Amazing. And so obviously you're on X, so please find Metanova on X, and then obviously on your which subnet should they look for?
Subnet 68.
68.
Yes.
Subnet 68. Oh, that's like I like there's some magic numbers in crypto. You're almost there to the super magic number. It's in between the two good ones. So for some reason 67 is now also a magic number. I don't fully understand 67, but apparently it's a magic number too, with I guess Gen Z. And one side note, there are increasingly just fascinating groups that I think is probably worth, Micaela and Pedro, for you to know about, and I'm happy to make connections there. The Convergence Group, which is funded by the Eric Schmidt Foundation, spun off the Everything versus Everything. They call it EVE Foundation. It's a nonprofit, and they basically look at targets and different molecules, different FDA like drug repurposing. I met with the CEO yesterday, actually, Elaine. She's phenomenal. I will make that connection for you because it's just more data, right? And they want partners too. And so like this ecosystem, as it evolves, for Metanova to be in the middle of it is really exciting.
Thank you. No, I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate all connections. And I think we need to band together as DeSci. Like we're really tackling like a common problem. And I think what crypto allows us to do is to have the incentive to like collaborate and work together and like move past any kind of zero-sum games and just make the pie as big as possible.
Agreed. It's going to take an entire ecology of companies, scientists, founders, investors to move the needle on every single front, right? So very excited to have you both. Thank you, Micaela. Thank you, Pedro.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. We'll be continuing to track the story and looking forward to partnering with you on multiple fronts in the future as well.
Thank you so much.
Amazing, Ryan. Thank you.